Hello, Avatar fans, and welcome to the next episode of the Avatar Online podcast. This is going to be episode 234 of our regular shows, and we are recording this on September the 5th, 2021. This is the official podcast for the fan site AvatarTheLastAirbender.online.com, and I'm going to be your main host, Morgan Airspeed Prime. Joining me on the podcast is Greg2B from the site.
What's up, everyone?
And yes, we have an interesting show planned here. Obviously, it's all news, but there is actually some pretty big pieces of news along with a lot of merchandise stuff as usual. So we'll just be kind of going through all of that sort of in a row. And we're going to start off with the Kickstarter. This has been a big focus of the last like 2 or 3 podcasts, so we'll get it out of the way here. But it's also important to give it some time because the funding period has come to an end. The month is over, so we have the final totals and stuff like that. So after its month of backing, it ended up with $9,535,022. The total number of backers was 81,564. They're saying there was 34 stretch goals unlocked. I won't go through everything since we've covered most of it. They broke some records, including becoming the number 10 top funded of all Kickstarters, so that's the money amount. And then they were number 9 in terms of most backed, so the total number of backers. And they're also saying they are the number 1 tabletop role-playing game on Kickstarter. So that's really cool. The only other addition to the stretch goals since I think we last talked was the final stretch goal was what they're calling a celebrity actual play. So it's basically a video of some celebrities playing the game. It includes Jenny Kwan, so Suki, and also Dante Basco, Zuko, along with I think 2 people who are mainly more known for being into role-playing games, more so than being related to Avatar. So that was a little bit controversial. That was probably the most heavy criticism I saw in the comments throughout the whole campaign, was just final stretch goal. We were waiting like a week for them to announce it, and then when it finally hit, it's like, that's it. Especially because it is just a thing that backers will have temporary sort of exclusivity, because we'll get to see it early, but it's then going to go public at a certain point. So the one thing they added onto it is that they're making the story that they played through into a sort of PDF adventure, so that's at least something that backers will have. But yeah, let's just discuss those kind of final details. So obviously blew away everyone's expectations. I don't think many people went into this expecting it to make over 9 million, nearly hit 10 million. What are your thoughts on the numbers by the end?
Yeah, I mean, that seems really amazing, right? Like, definitely, I mean, when we were thinking about this in the beginning, we definitely didn't get it up that high, maybe a couple million at that, but this is definitely like, more than doubled anything that I would have thought initially. But I mean, I guess it just really shows you just sort of the interest in Avatar that sort of has come full scope now, and just sort of the huge resurgence, which is of course why we're seeing all the stuff with Avatar Studios and everything else. So I don't know, it really just, I guess, hones down on that, it is still a viable property that, many people are interested in, and, the way that I think for the most part, the Kickstarter, went pretty well. They did like a tons of like advertising on it. Like, it was, if you were even, remotely had anything that would like sort of incline your, social media ads towards this, it was pretty much in your face, I think. Other than the whole last bit with the last goal, which definitely was odd, but I don't know, I think it feels like they were like scrambling to figure out things by the end of there, just with how everything just kept going and going and going. So, I guess that's just sort of how, it was unexpected. And they did do a AMA on Reddit, sort of, going over, some of the, just questions that people were asking. And, you definitely got to feel that it was way bigger than, what they thought it might be, even though they thought it would do really well. So it's pretty cool just to see, that sort of side of things as well.
Yeah, it's crazy to think just how well it did, because I think before the Kickstarter even kicked off, we were kind of discussing like, oh, their previous project is Root, which is effectively the same game, so that the same sort of stuff will be part of this
Yeah.
campaign, and it more or less turned out to be the same. That did, I think, like 600,000, and we're thinking, oh, it'll probably do double, maybe triple that, but it obviously it's done like 15 times that, so that was incredible, and you obviously have to put that number down to Avatar. It's the franchise, the license here that did that,
Yeah.
because the game is the same between those two franchises. And then Root, I think, is pretty well regarded in the sort of board game slash role playing game space. So, Avatar doing this well highlights that above all else. Like, huge numbers for a product that is effectively just a book about how to play a game, where only like 10-15% of it is actually going to be sort of Avatar information. The rest is this is what your dice rolls do, sort of thing. And again, the other top 10 stuff is more of the really high end board game stuff, where you get lots of miniatures, or like technology products like smartwatches and stuff like that, like
Yeah.
coolers and stuff like that are the other things. So like proper like full on pieces of technology. So this doing so well is a major success for Avatar. A few other things here. They do have late pledges, so there was no doubt that
Hmm.
this thing was ever going to fail. This was just a pre-order system, basically. You basically have a whole other month to also back if you want, because they have the sort of backer kit open for late pledges. But they're saying
Hmm.
that the backer kit for everyone else, for getting like shipping information and answering some of the key questions, will be coming in the next few weeks. Um, Obviously, they say they're taking a week or so off to regroup after all of this, and that there will be now monthly updates. So they're going to have at least one update each month, which makes sense. They've only got about 6 months to hit the fulfillment on the digital stuff and then the physical stuff. So that's about 5-6 updates, depending on how it works. And they are saying that they will be giving out new play materials as they go through. So that'll be interesting to see just how much stuff they give to backers sort of in advance. Um, the only other thing is from I think the second last update, they did talk about like the struggle that they may face to actually fulfill some of this stuff, that they're struggling to find enough paper, I think, and stuff like that to actually make this happen. Yeah, here it is in the third last update. Global supply issues. So they're saying our printer is telling us that there may not be enough cardboard in the United States to print these books on our original schedule. Um, it's been so big and incredible that they're straining the capacity of every printer we're talking to about the new order quantities. So they're doing their best. They're talking to a lot of other printers, but obviously they're getting across the idea that for the nearly, I guess, 200,000 hardcover books that they're going to need to print, maybe more than that, they are struggling with this, given that supply issues are just getting worse and worse, and so on. They're still sticking to, like, they feel they can hit the February date for all the physical stuff, but my reading of this, plus their history with previous campaigns, more or less leads me to believe that this will be delayed, but they'll try to minimize it as much as possible. But what are your thoughts on some of these kind of final points they're making here about just sort of potential delays and how they're going to handle the sort of fulfillment of this?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of an unfortunate thing of like a lot of Kickstarters, even the ones that do the best, is, even on the best of, world global situations, it's, once you do so well on Kickstarter and there is such a high demand, meeting that, especially if it exceeds your original expectations, is always a hard thing to sort of, process and everything. So, I mean, fulfillment is like the hardest thing ever to do. And it did do really well. I mean, with the amount of books that they do have to sort of print and to gather together, I mean, like you said, I wouldn't really be surprised if it isn't delayed. And to some degree, I mean, I don't know, maybe they can minimize it by doing sort of waves. A lot of different places do stuff like that. Or I don't know. I mean, I think, as long as, they communicate that as best they can. And like you said, if they're doing monthly updates and, any other more updates that they have to do, that's really sort of like the best you can do in that sort of situation. So, I mean, if it takes like a couple more months to do it, that wouldn't really be too surprising. I mean, I'm sure people are still going to be, upset regardless, and that's completely understandable since they did set expectations to begin with. But that is just sort of a fact of things, regardless of everything else that's going on, unfortunately.
Mm. Yeah, the one thing though is that they seem very, very confident that the digital stuff will go out in January. That's them not having to worry about physical stuff getting books printed. That's just finalizing the text and details. So in terms of us like judging sort of the new content, I guess it means we will be getting somewhat of a story, like lore drop type stuff in January to talk about. So that's at least kind of something to look forward to with the extra Roku information. And I think by my reading, there's going to be some extra Wan Shi Tong information. We'll see exactly how that goes. But overall, it should be interesting to see how it does all go. I back I think second highest tier Polar Bear Dog, so special edition book. I just couldn't bring myself to go for the higher tier to pay 100 for the special dice. They look cool, but I'm not very interested in that. Did you end up backing it at all?
Yeah, I did the same level.
Yeah, it just seemed like I think the $75 tier was the most backed one, just because it was the big one they were promoting the most, and like it's I think the best overall value. But the special book seems really cool though. The holographic, we're going to get to choose which characters on the front and back. But there's a lot of physical stuff that you do get with it, and that's going to be fun. And I'd say that's a large amount of the reason that they did so well, that without all those physical items, you could probably knock a couple of million maybe off this. And it is a huge part of why there was so much interest. Like getting the cloth map, even the White Lotus tile is probably a big deal for a lot of people. The fact that all the extra stuff is compiled into like a second hardcover with Wan Shi Tong on the front, that's cool. And like the little notebooks are just like fun items. But like I suppose of those kind of physical items, what do you find the most interesting in terms of what they're offering?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was really cool to see them, add more and more stuff as they go on. But yeah, the special edition covers, I think, like you said, that was the reason why I went just a little bit more, because I was really just considering the 75, just because, you don't really need everything, especially if you're not really hardcore into, most likely playing the game, which, for I would suspect a lot of people, that is one of the things. But no, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I really think the notebooks are actually pretty cool too, just in terms of just sort of how they're using them and how, I'm sure you can use them for other things as well. But no, I mean, there's, a good amount of items in this overall, in addition to the digital, and just getting, a lot of the story content, even if it is, in little bits, which, kind of makes sense with the way that the whole, game's actually meant to be run. So.
Yeah, and when the backer kit opens, you can add extra stuff in. I'm kind of almost thinking like, should I get another journal pack just to have them as like little notebooks? That might be something, especially because I don't think it's too expensive. I think it's like $10 for another set of the 5. And they're really cool looking, actually. I like the kind of finalized images of them, where you've got the main element symbol, but then like there's like subtle element symbols in the background of all of them. But yeah, we'll be getting monthly updates on the Kickstarter, and I guess we can talk about them as they come out and see what extra information they reveal. Because they also teased, I think, right at the end that there would be some like extra special stuff that they do for the rest of the campaign, that I got the impression was meant to be sort of along the lines of the actual play thing. So we'll see exactly what's going on there. Will they be getting like voice actors to do sort of promo things, videos, tutorials, or whatever? We'll see. But anyway, next piece of news, just a really quick one here on the Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl game. The finalized cover, which was previously just a silhouette cover, got leaked. I believe it was the icon for the game on the Nintendo eShop, so people found that. And obviously it's a finalized image. It's basically the cover image, and of course, Aang and Korra are in fact there. They have not been officially revealed as characters because they're sort of doing them like two at a time, kind of like Smash Brother character reveals. So
Yeah.
there's about 4 or 5 characters from the cover who haven't been revealed yet. I think it's mainly Ren and Stimpy, and then Aang and Korra who haven't been revealed, and then maybe other characters who aren't on the cover. So the expectation with this game, I think the eShop leaked that October 5th is the release date potentially for the game. That only leaves them a month to announce the remaining few characters. So in the next few weeks, Aang and Korra are going to have to get announced. I think some of the other trailers showed off that there's at least a second Avatar stage in the game as well. It looks like Omashu, because there's like Cabbage Merchant and so on in it. And I think people are kind of excited for this game just because of like the Nickelodeon nostalgia and the fact that for Avatar, like, cool, we're going to get a fighting game that involves at least a few Avatar characters, and the Smash Bros style is pretty cool. Obviously gonna probably wait for reviews to see how it does, but if it's, on sale or something like that, I can see myself maybe picking this up if the Avatar content is decent. But where are you at with the All-Star Brawl game?
I mean, the concept and the idea of it is pretty cool. I mean, having the throwback of all the characters in the game is fun, and having Avatar and Aang and Korra in it, for me, it's obviously a win from that regard. I'm really curious to see, the actual mechanics of it and how it all interacts, based off of what we've already seen from stuff so far. So no, I like the idea behind it. I mean, it's only for console, so that kind of puts me out of actually getting it. But no, the idea of it is really cool. I'm interested to see, all the people playing and what people do with it and whatnot.
Yeah. If I was to get it, I'd be getting it for Switch. So we'll see how it runs. I guess performance is probably the main thing there that could be an issue. But yeah, that's that video game news. But yeah, we expect next week or two that'll happen. I hope they kind of frame the Avatar characters as being like major ones. I wouldn't be surprised if they were the last characters revealed, because they probably have some of the coolest move sets, because only I think the turtles from TMNT really are sort of fighters as such. I suppose they have Reptar from Rugrats, so he's, I guess, a monster, so they can do stuff with him. But yeah, there's only a handful of characters here who are clear, like, actually have sort of typical sort of fighting moves, so that's interesting. The next piece of news is probably the most negative piece of news that we have here, and the most confusing, but it sort of fits the story of this book since it's been announced and just the confusion surrounding it. So Beasts of the Four Nations has apparently been postponed indefinitely. Now, the reason I say that and sort of quote it like that is because I caught this on Edelweiss, which is where I usually source most of my information on like the books from, because it's a very official site that has proper listings and stuff like that. You can get preview copies from that site, so it's really, really official. They had that book up for months and months with the previous release date, February next year. Then I looked at it and it's all sort of crossed out, big red text over the availability, and it says postponed indefinitely. Then I look a few days later and it's just gone. It's not up there anymore. And then you add that to the fact that the listings have basically been either taken down or set to like not in stock, temporarily not available, you can't order this book in a lot of the big places. Obviously smaller sites still have it up, but they still have it up with the old release date and so on. But the main thing, of course, is that Dark Horse still have not acknowledged that this book exists in terms of listing it on their website. I don't think it's ever been talked about on their social media channels or acknowledged by any of the Nickelodeon social media channels. It's purely gone up on publishing websites, retail websites, and circulated amongst the fandom. And now it just seems like it's completely up in the air as to what's happening. Before we get into, I suppose, speculation about where it could go, what were your thoughts just seeing this happen to this book? It seemingly just being unavailable right now. It potentially doesn't really have a release date.
Yeah, this is really, I don't know, it's really odd. It definitely seems like just something in the back end just didn't line up with how everything was actually planning. But, I guess from the beginning, we've been saying that this, the fact that we're getting, or that we know of it and we're getting these notices or we thought we were getting these notices, it just seemed out of order. Like, it just seemed odd. I mean, we were wondering what this, the last book was actually going to be, and then we found out. Um, but, considering how the whole rest of the lineup is going, it always seemed a bit odd.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's the big thing. Of like, this is part of a series of 6 books, the deluxe editions, that feature, of course, the Avatar and then the 4 Korra art books, and then there was one extra. This is it. It got confirmed. The image of it with the deluxe slipcase, which completes the spine image, is out there. So that's what this is. But the release date that it had placed it as the like fourth of 6 releases, which didn't really make a lot of sense. And I'm guessing that's what's happened here. This just got announced too early for some reason. It just slipped through when maybe some of the other
Yeah.
books are getting delayed. This one got announced beforehand, and it's actually more meant to be end of 2022 because we have announced up to the book 3 art book, and that's coming out in February as well. Uh, that would leave the book 4 Balance second edition art book to come out in probably July, August, and then hopefully December or maybe February 2023, finally this book to actually come out. That would be the more realistic release date for it, based on the way it should be, as like this should be 6 of 6 rather than this comes out before any of the other art books. The other thing to factor in here is that it seems like all Dark Horse like announcements have sort of been put on hold, and that like we haven't heard about a new book announced in quite a while, and the release schedule only goes up to February, and we learned about February books like a few months ago, so we're sort of waiting for announcements, and we'll maybe touch on that with one of the news pieces later on. But what are your thoughts on this? Do you sort of go with the whole it's meant to be 6 of 6, so it'll be positioned more in line with that?
I mean, that, no, honestly makes the most sense to me. I mean, it feels like, the date that they originally had for it was like a whole year off, basically. Like, that would, realistically or chronologically make more sense in terms of the actual release date. And the fact that, this is a book that is more unique and potentially has, actual new information that we've never, heard of before, and, new art as well. It makes sense that this one, out of any of them, would take the longest to sort of develop and would actually need the most, sort of like hands-on, official, input from, people actually, doing the show and stuff rather than sort of a rehash of the other stuff with like, like a updated forward or stuff like that. So I don't know. I mean, it's unfortunate that we sort of, hyped it up a bit, too early because we knew of it and that was sort of like the cool thing. But this does seem along the lines of how it really should have been, unfortunately.
Yeah, and then you also have to factor in that the February date is the date. February 2022 was the date it settled on after, I think, initially being October this year, then
Mm.
December this year, then February, and now postponed until who knows when. Probably the whole at least 6 months on, if not more. So again, we're waiting on this, but like you said, the fact that this is the 6th book and it probably has 10, 20 times as much work that will need to go into it as any of the other releases like put together, because yeah, it was listed as basically being over 200 pages long, and I don't think they're going to use screenshots from the show, meaning that they either need to use concept art for animals that already exist, or have artists create new art throughout the whole book. And then there's very little, I think, official text about a lot of animals, so basically all of the text in the book is going to have to be new as well. So it's probably the biggest like resource thing that they need to put their time into of all the books that they've put out there, even more than I think probably any of the comics, just because they probably have a million artists working on this, I'd assume. and who knows how many people writing for it. But we have to wait and see. My guess is the next we'll hear about this probably is that it will get a more official announcement, like as if we haven't heard about it for the last 6 months. They'll just be like, hey, this new book is out, but it'll probably have proper information about it. Like, they'll say who the artists are. They'll probably will have preview pages to go along with it. But what would be your guess for like when we more officially maybe hear about this?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I mean, 6 months, that seems good. I mean, I guess I would expect that maybe like, maybe a couple months before whatever the new actual release date is, since that's usually how most of these things go, especially since, the other ones are still going and things seem to still be shifting and whatnot. So I think it would be quite a while. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's like, a from scratch announcement rather than what we've previously seen.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, moving into more merchandise style things, we have some McFarlane stuff to talk about. So when the McFarlane stuff, we first started to hear about it from the listings with no pictures, it included 7-inch figures and also a statue. Those extra items have now been officially revealed and like dated. You can pre-order them. So I suppose first up we have the Avatar: The Last Airbender Aang 12-inch statue from McFarlane. So it's basically the Avatar Legends Aang in Avatar state pose, slightly altered to be an air scooter pose, and then the statue is Aang on an air scooter, and then it's a big but pretty basic disc black base. It's not like super interesting, I think, as a concept for a statue. It's nice and nicely sculpted and so on, but compared to some of the other statues that we've seen, it seems a little boring to me. And then just the fact that it's Avatar state Aang and all he's doing is an air scooter, it feels a bit weird as a statue. Like, it's fine for like Korra at the start of book 2 to do that, but it's weird to sort of put that in plastic as a statue, that he's using the Avatar state to do an air scooter, which he can do without it. So a little bit disappointing here, but the focus with McFarlane, I think, is much more on the figures. But what are your thoughts on this statue?
Yeah, no, I wonder about that because it does, I don't know, it does come off a little bit, I guess, sort of plain maybe. And I don't know, that could be just because we're like so used to seeing this pose just in general. And like, I'm pretty sure it's been done before. So it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't really stand out. And maybe that's just because we were sort of thinking more about, I don't know, I guess maybe we were holding maybe them up for a higher sort of standard for these specifically. I mean, it definitely looks cool overall. And I think, when you see it from like the profile views, I think it definitely sort of stands out. But, overall in terms of a figure, it doesn't really feel, I don't know, it doesn't really feel that imposing, which is interesting considering like we sort of knock some of the other ones because of how they're doing things. So I don't know, it is interesting, but yeah, I think like you said, definitely for them, it's more about the other figures than particularly their statues, which I don't think we really, I don't know if we really considered McFarlane for statues before when we were discussing this or discussing them specifically.
Mm-hmm. And then the other two are the 7-inch figures finally revealed, though again Todd McFarlane did briefly show off the Zuko, so we got a glimpse of it, but we have better pictures now. So wave 1 of 7-inch is book 1 Aang and book 1 Zuko. So Aang comes with his glider staff, just in staff form, so you don't get a glider. It also comes with an air scooter and then a smaller, circular disc black base. The Zuko comes with sort of a kind of jet of fire, quite long, that wraps around one of his arms, and then 2 fire daggers for him to hold in his hands. Both figures have kind of angry expressions. Like, Zuko's is very, very angry, open mouth. Aang's expression is more of a kind of snarl, which I don't think quite fits the character. I think this, after seeing so many book 1 Aangs in a row over the last few months, I really feel the book one Aang design is not overly suited to work as an action figure that well. And it would, I think one of the major Japanese companies taking a shot at it to do it perfect, basically. I think they do a decent job here, in that it's probably, for me, one of the better takes on the sort of orange shawl, just having it locked in a sort of moving with the air pose rather than trying to have it like locked in another sort of position. But the articulation does look quite good on these. Double jointed elbows, double jointed knees, lots of stuff with the ankles and the feet, and that's a pretty good sign. Somewhat limited accessories as well. I think we maybe expected a little bit more from McFarlane, but maybe that can improve as things go on. I think the reception so far to these has been quite good, but I've noticed people are beginning to get a little bit bored of like, okay, it's a new line, we have to start with book one Aang, book one Zuko, and it will take like 3 or 4 waves before we finally get to like Mei, Suki, and the characters we've been waiting for ages. So there's that. So yeah, I think these look pretty nice, but again, I don't think any company has like nailed the face so far yet, which has been a little bit concerning, but they'll improve as they go on. But what are your thoughts on the 7-inch figures?
Yeah, I mean, overall, they're definitely, well constructed. I think out of the two of them, I think definitely Zuko for me is sort of the better, I guess, sort of designed or, sort of, I don't know, just sort of sculpted figure out of the two of them. I do agree that I don't know, it's odd that it seems like we're always mentioning sort of either the face sculpt in terms of just overall shape or sort of the expression that they choose. I mean, I don't know, I guess maybe they're trying to sort of like mirror the facial expressions with each other, which, looking at them side by side, that sort of works well. But in terms of like, Aang as a character, unless it's like a specific key moment, he usually doesn't have that much of a serious face, at least not in the beginning for sure. So it does look a bit sort of odd, and I don't know, I guess, we're always wondering if they can do, like extra, because as well in order to sort of change the expressions. I think for this one, for Aang, I think that would have been really good to have, just because it seems, I don't know, it definitely seems like a pose or an expression that you wouldn't necessarily see. At least that's how I get it. But I mean, overall, the construction of the figure is fine. I think, definitely seems like it has, a lot of posability, which I think is something that people really, wanted to be done well. We'll see how, I guess, it actually works in practice in terms of like, how well it actually holds the different poses and stuff like that. But, for the example images that they have here for Aang, it looks like it's pretty well that you can hold it in different poses and it'll actually hold things together. So I definitely, appreciate that part, in terms of getting that down, because I think that's been something that hasn't been the best. At least that's what I've seen expressed from other people. So no, I think, it definitely seems like it's in the better step. I don't know if maybe we were, putting too much stock into them as a company in terms of like the best ever, figure yet, but they're still going, and I mean, it seems like everyone is, who wants to some degree, he's able to get the license for at least a couple figures. So, maybe there's hope that another company will get it and will take another stab at it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think immediately, like, these immediately look like a big improvement over the Diamond Select figures, which is the same size, basically, as these. Just in terms of the articulation, looks a lot more usable than it is in the other figures, which feel very stiff and impossible to pose, like, in a reasonable amount of time. I just put this wave down to a little bit of... I think the fandom in general is not the biggest fan of the Book 1 Zuko design as like your main Zuko figure, and then, like I said, the Book 1 Aang design is not the best for converting into plastic overall. But I'm excited to see these do the Book 3 character designs, because I think they'll work nicer, because, they can't do a super angry Zuko expression on that, because he's not as angry then, and then Aang's Book 3 design is a lot easier to do, I think, because he's got more normal sort of like pants on basically, and not crazy color schemes and so on. And he doesn't have the shawl to restrict his shoulder motions. But yeah, there's also like, how will they do a Katara when they get around to her and so on. So yeah, all this extra stuff is scheduled for October, whereas the 5-inch stuff is basically out now or coming out within the next week or two, depending on where exactly you are, where you ordered from. I think I'm expecting some of my 5-inch Wave 1 to come in next week, so that should be fun to see what they're like. Next, we're still on merchandise, still on figures. It is we've both got the sort of tease and reveal for a new Azula Funko Pop. It's an exclusive. It's an Azula with a glow chase version. It's exclusive in the US to Big Apple Collectibles, in the UK to Pop in a Box, see Discount in France, and Back to the Toys in the Netherlands. That's what they've announced so far. The Azula is basically Sozin's Comet Azula during the final battle, the Agni Kai, with Zuko. So you can see Azula with her hair cut. She's doing the sort of fire flying thing to kind of hover on the ground with some blue fire. And that's, of course, the glow in the dark effect is on the blue fire. I think it looks really cool. I've seen a pretty positive reaction to this just because the previous Azula was difficult to get, and while this is another exclusive, at least there's 2 Azulas and more of an option to get the figure. Seems pretty cool, and I'm, if I can get this without spending too much, I'll try, because I'm going as completion as possible on the Funkos without diving into like getting every single exclusive version. I'm more of a kind of like, I want most of the molds rather than I need the glow and the normal edition. But what are your thoughts on this new Azula Funko Pop?
No, I think this is definitely a unique and cool design that they actually chose for Azula. I think that's always like a really sort of like iconic moment from the show, and a lot of people remember, especially since it happened, at the end as well. So I think, for them to do this, it definitely is going to, raise some heads, for sure. So I suspect it probably will be hard to get, especially if you don't get it after like the initial, sort of go for these things. So definitely second market will be hard for this one. But in terms of design, I think it works pretty well. I don't know, initially it was a bit odd to see sort of like, I think the haircut in that moment, and just how they sort of designed it for here. But I think as I've seen it more and more, it sort of grows on me in terms of how it actually works, and the fact that she's lifting off the ground is really cool.
Yeah, like the one slight inaccuracy is that during this scene she doesn't actually have the hairpiece in her hair, because her normal one is taken out because she was about to be crowned as Fire Lord. It didn't happen, so she goes into the fight without having anything in her hair, which is why like at the end of the fight, you see that she has her hair down because nothing's keeping it in place, basically. But I appreciate it to a degree because it's an extra piece of detail. And even if it's not 100% accurate, it's like accurate enough. People get what it's going for. And yeah, hopefully we'll see a few more unique exclusives like this get announced, and we hit some of the other characters. I think we're at the point now where they probably have to hit a few obvious like redos of earlier characters, like Book 3 Katara, definitely. Sokka in his invasion armor, in his more battle outfit, I think they definitely need to do. And then I think beyond that, you are maybe getting into, do you do another Iroh? Do you start to do the other avatars? Get into more of the obscure characters, like maybe the Owl members and that sort of thing. Because they've already done a Cabbage Merchant, so and it did pretty well.
Yeah.
So your exclusives and with how popular Avatar is, I think you can do more or less anything and make it work. But which would be the characters you'd want to see next for Avatar Pop?
Yeah, no, I wonder how, like, would they go for the more sort of like obscure, like sort of, meme characters? I mean, the Captain America, he's like a high level meme, but like, like foamy mouth guy, would they go that sort of far? Or would they do like, I don't know, more Kyoshi Warriors? I mean, I think probably the other avatars are probably, the better bet in terms of, recognizability and sort of getting your returns on, the process of actually making them and stuff. So that might be more along the lines. But yeah, I guess if they were to just sort of start doing some redos for characters or just do like more alternate outfits, I guess out of all of the like, figures and toys and stuff that we've gotten, Funko Pop obviously has had to like lead on it, so now they can sort of, hopefully have fun with it and do other characters that, they necessarily wouldn't do because, you might not see as much of a return on it. But I think now with the popularity and everything with it, resurging, they can probably, if any of the like, makers of these can do it, they would be the ones that could go for it. So here's hoping.
Yeah, and then I didn't mention before, but I think they probably should do another Book 3 Zuko just because the previous one was an exclusive and it was specifically him lightning redirecting. I can definitely see value in doing a more normal or firebending Book 3 Zuko, or maybe like a double pop of like Aang and Zuko doing the dancing dragon, if that's possible. That would be kind of cool. They do the fists kind of like leaning into each other at the end kind of type thing, maybe. But next, the final merchandise piece of news here is QMX, who we talked about a few months ago. They're going to be doing the Q Pals, the kind of plushies in the chibi style, and they also announced an Aang Q-Fig Elite with some cool effect parts. They've now announced an equivalent Sokka and Katara. So it's the first Sokka statue, which is kind of cool, and then Katara also gets a similar one. We'll start with the Sokka. I think it's really cool. I like how they do this. It's obviously Sokka in this sort of unique chibi style where it's not fully chibi, but it's stylized enough. And he's on top of a sort of snow-covered rock. And it's this kind of cool pose as if he's like just caught his boomerang or something like that, has just come back, and I think it's sculpted really, really well with the detail, and for Sokka fans this seems like a cool thing because I'm not sure how quickly a lot of the other companies are going to get to doing a Sokka statue. But what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, Sokka, I think out of all the ones we've seen so far from them in this style, that this one actually stands out the most to me. I think I actually like this one more than Aang, even though Aang has like so much more going on. I think maybe it's just the simplicity of this one and being able to see, Sokka full figured here. With the effect part here as well. I think that really works well. Like it doesn't feel like over cluttered. It just sort of focuses on the character. It has the boomerang, which is, of course, iconic and a bit of an environment sculpt as well. So no, I think this is a nice one.
Mm-hmm. The Katara is on a similar sort of snow-covered rock to Sokka, but there's a lot going on here. Like they have a kind of waves up against the rock around her. They've got a kind of tidal wave type thing coming over her head, and they've got sort of water coming out of her pouches for like the sort of water whip type thing. I think this looks really cool because I like how they've done the detailing on the water, in that the water that's like around her coming out of the pouches, at least in the lighting, sort of seems very shiny, and then the water otherwise seems more sort of like painted, and has these kind of cool effects in it where some of it is more aqua, some of it's darker kind of blue. It's a really nice effect part, definitely. It's not as sort of like wild, I think, as the Diamond Select Katara effect part, which I still really like, but it was a bit like, whoa, this is kind of crazy. This feels more realistic for bending, but I like this one. This is probably my favorite of the three so far, and it makes me very excited to see some other characters. But what are your thoughts on the Katara?
Yeah, no, I think this one overall is pretty good. I think initially, and maybe even still a little bit, it seems almost like it definitely feels like there's a lot going on, but they definitely I don't know. It feels like they went, they took a different style in terms of doing the water effect part. So I think that's sort of one of those things that'll either, work for you or won't work for you. But I don't know. I think it's interesting just to see how they chose to sort of illustrate the water and how it's flowing all around her and from the pouch as well. So I don't know. I think it's definitely a cool one. I'm not sure how up I am on feeling on this one.
Hmm. And yeah, it just makes me excited to see how they do fire and then earth. So like Toph and Zuko, I guess, will probably be the
Yeah.
next ones.
Hmm.
In that they look to be going for sort of like themed bases, where like the Water Tribe characters are on the snowy rock, the Airbender characters are on the sort of tree stump. So Firebenders will be on, I'm not sure. Earthbenders just any sort of rocky sort of outcrop thing. But just seeing how big of an effect part they go for with Toph, how they do it, it's going to be kind of cool.
Hmm.
Um, the only thing is that again, it's all book one stuff, and I would much prefer book three Zuko over book one Zuko. But it'll probably be book one Zuko. But what are your thoughts on future ones of these?
Yeah, no. I guess it's always the repeat is that we're always sort of starting from square one. But yeah, no, I mean, doing Zuko, I mean, if they do him in the iron, I mean, in the armor, I don't know, maybe they do some sort of effect that's like based off of, being on the ship, since that was like the main focus in book one. I don't know how they would sort of like incorporate that. But I don't know. I mean, Toph for sure can definitely be pretty cool. The way that they would do is sort of the whole rock outcropping and blending that into the effect, which I think will definitely be really nice to see because the platform is what she's doing. So that one, I think, like you said, I'm looking forward to see how they do that one for sure. But yeah, I mean, I guess if they do, if they can get to the later books, I mean, that would be really cool. I think it'd be cool to see if they were to like do a different, water effect for Katara when she's more skilled. Because I think that would be really cool to see, especially with her other outfit as well.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that's a large reason of why like I can't see myself going full on buying all of these, but if there's one in the right character design that I like, I can definitely see
Hmm.
myself picking up at least one of these. But so far, just because it's not book three Katara, it's not book three Aang, I think I'll probably be skipping a lot of these early ones and see where they go from here. Um, Now, the other thing is that, again, I think we talked about this before, is that these are Q-Fig Elites. They also do just normal Q-Figs, which are cheaper. I'd maybe hope
Hmm.
they do some of them as well, because like it is $50 per each of these, mainly because of the big bases. But normal Q-Figs have more simplified bases, but still the character's doing something. So that could be an option to do it. And that like if they did a Suki at a cheaper price point with some fan stuff,
Mm.
I'd be all over that just to get some Suki merchandise because I think everyone's waiting for the first like Suki figure. She already has her Funko Pop, but where's the first Suki figure or statue coming from? But we have to wait and see. So yeah, that's the merchandise, and then the last two pieces of news are Avatar Studios news. We'll actually cover the one that came out sort of later first, which is that Joan Hilty announced on Instagram that she's going to be joining Avatar Studios. So here's what she said. I'm thrilled to share that I'm joining Avatar Studios as executive editor starting next week. The chance to build out this rich, meaningful, wild Avatar verse with Mike DiMartino and Brian Konietzko and their amazing team. It's a dream gig and it's going to be a fantastic ride. Hashtag all the Avatar stuff. Um, this is interesting. It's only the fourth person that we know, like as individuals who are a part of Avatar Studios. Mike Bryan, Jeremy Zuckerman, and now Joan Hilty. So a lot of people with her is kind of like, who is she? Why should we be like, aware of this as such? Her role prior to switching over to Avatar Studios was that she had effectively the same role but for Nickelodeon, where she would be the sort of like more or less sort of like publishing liaison that like Dark Horse would work with. She'd work with all the Nickelodeon brands, but for us, Avatar and Korra would be the ones that we'd be familiar with. You'll notice if you pick up any of the comics, she is always a special thanks in the credits, and I think she appeared at a couple of Comic Cons. I believe she was the one who put out that survey that time at that New York Comic Con, asking people what stories they'd like to see. That nothing really came of it, but you know, she asked about it anyway. And she has a whole history of like being involved in the comic industry and stuff like that. So the interest here is that this is the first sort of person who is joining Avatar Studios in a more publishing position, I guess, which we've kind of been waiting to hear about, of like, is Avatar Studios now fully in charge of the books? And I think her switching over to Avatar Studios specifically probably tells us that, like, yes, they have a publishing plan. She's going to be in charge of that as the executive editor, which I guess means head editor. That is a sort of pretty major role. This might explain why things have been slow on the sort of new book kind of scenario. Might explain the postponement of Beast of the Four Nations, why the Korra comic also basically seems to have been postponed, even though it never got officially announced. The main thing I get across here is that this news is probably bigger than you maybe think, if you're not in the loop on who exactly she is. But what are your thoughts on Joan Hilty joining Avatar Studios?
No, I mean, in terms of just getting a new exec working with the project, directly, it's always a good thing, just because it means that things are progressing, and they are sort of building out, sort of their core group of people that are actually, working, to continue the franchise, which is, obviously what we're all about and what we all want to sort of continue. So the fact that they do have someone that, can oversee that, the hope is that, everything will run, more smoothly, or as smoothly as it can. And, someone who's directly in line, who can, answer the questions, or, at least tell people, to get started on like all the questions that we always have, is in terms of like, when things are getting released, or when things are starting to work on, or just, someone who's coordinating everything. So no, it's definitely a good thing. And, the fact that she does have experience with it from before is, a plus as well. So people that, care about, the show and stuff is always, a positive, at least in my book.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's kind of notable as well that like the first reply to this is from Faith Erin Hicks. So obviously she would have worked with Joan Hilty on the most recent 6 comics. So she's obviously happy about this. So that's interesting to note. The next, I suppose, last piece of news here, it's obviously probably the biggest piece of news we've had about Avatar Studios since the initial announcement. I think it's just important to note, I suppose, where this kind of came from. It's on the Viacom CBS website. It's a news article that isn't about Avatar, but just happens to mention some important new information. It's in an article called Brian Robbins on Prioritizing Kids and Family Content Across Platforms. And it's basically just a text version with snippets from a video interview that they did. They link a video, but it's like even shorter than the text that they have in the article. So I'm not really sure if like that the full thing is out there anywhere. But I think the main information comes out here. You skim down through towards the end for the most part, and you get to this quote where Brian Robbins, who is obviously one of the what's the specific role here? Brian Robbins is the president and CEO of Nickelodeon, and also the chief content officer of Kids and Family for Paramount Plus. So this is basically our main exec guy who made Avatar Studios happen. So that's his position. He says in answer to one of the questions, and one of the other big projects that we're working on the theatrical front is Avatar. We signed a deal to bring the original creators of Avatar back into the studios. They started Avatar Studios, and they're well on their way in development on a series of CG films and a new Avatar series. That's basically the main thing to take away from this. So there's sort of 2 things here. One, films, CG films, and then separately to that, like, and also a new Avatar series. So we knew before this the film was the first project. We hadn't really heard much else beyond that. But then there was also, like, hidden in the press release the idea that series for Avatar would be on Paramount Plus within the first 2 years of the platform. So that also presented us the idea that realistically the second project is probably a series. This is more direct confirmation that, you know, from an article from, like, 3 days ago now, he's talking about films and a series. They're the two main projects on the go right now. So that is kind of new information. Now, obviously, this is an interesting one because the headlines are, of course, Avatar movies will be done with CG animation, and people have a certain reaction to that, and it's been quite mixed, to say the least. I think a lot of this comes down to the fact that this feels like just this slip of information that's randomly come out, and there's no context to it, so it just kind of feels like, oh no, what's happening? And until we get full context, there's always going to be people feeling that, like, oh, is Avatar Studios not what we thought it was, that they're not doing it in the right way? And until they come out and, like, officially confirm that the series is done with the traditional Avatar style, a lot of people are not going to be happy. So I suppose, just in terms of reaction, what was your reaction to seeing this piece of news for the first time?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I was just interested or just curious, just in terms of, this being, one of the routes that they're choosing to go for. I mean, like you said, it really is like just a line that, you don't even understand the full sort of, scope of how it's actually going to work out. But, I guess it was, something to see the reaction to it, just in terms of, how, that can be a bit polarizing, I guess, in general, for just,
That's even
fans
worse.
of animation in general, not just, Avatar fans, but just in general, that can go either way in terms of how it can be received.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because immediately this, from what I saw in the comments, it was a certain amount of people just being, like, very negative, like, no, I can't believe they've done this. And then a certain amount of people sort of in response to that being like, but we don't know, it's immediately going to be bad, like CG could be good. I put out a poll, and most of the response to that was people very in the middle of, like, wait and see but skeptical, wait and see but positive. Very few people were, like, super happy that it's CG, and then there was a reasonable amount of people who were, like, truly disappointed that it's CG. Again, it's hard to form an opinion on this without seeing the CG style and what exactly way it works, just because theoretically they could do a CG Avatar movie that looks really, really nice. The problem is, of course, that we don't know the budget, what studio is going to be doing this, or whatever. But because we know Mike and Brian are so heavily involved here, I can't imagine that they would have just agreed to this if they weren't confident that they could do Avatar well as a movie. Especially given that this is, I guess, going to be the first project that actually comes out. There's no way they're going to put out a bad Avatar thing, especially the first, like, animated Avatar film, and it be bad. The problem, obviously, is that we right now don't know if this is going to be sort of, Spider-Verse levels of animation, or if it's going to be more kind of low quality or whatever. It's just hard to speculate on that either way. I have some confidence just because Brian, whenever he speaks about Avatar more recently, you get the sense that he's a perfectionist. Like, he wants to do things in the best way possible, especially when it comes to the art, because he's, like, the art guy of the two. He's so critical of his previous work. I can't see him, like, agreeing to this if they can't do it in the right way. So they're obviously confident, I think, that they'll do it well. But What are your thoughts on that, about just the sort of skepticism towards CG, and is it possible to actually have an Avatar CG movie work out well?
Yeah, no, I definitely get, the understanding of, this could go, really bad really quickly. But, like you said, considering the people that are involved in it, and yeah, I mean, I definitely have seen a lot of those interviews as well, where they're, really sort of diving deep, at least a lot more than I can recall from previous interviews and stuff, in terms of, what they could have done better or what they hope to do better in the future. So, there's a lot of that, and we do know that, from the previous, project that they were all working on, they obviously left that because they didn't feel that it was, doing, it wasn't able to come up to their personal standards, or, what they had hoped for the show. So, there's that to consider in terms of, them even attempting to take this. And I'm sure that the whole idea of the, CG versus traditional animation is something that probably was talked way, way, way long ago, before, this, news just got out, or before they even joined. So I'm sure it's not like it's something that they're, they just sort of stumbled into, rather, more or less. Like, we're just finding out that now, and we're having our sort of like initial reactions to it. But, I'm sure they've been planning on this, and I'm sure that if this was something that they were considering from the beginning, they were already well aware for this eventual sort of, initial sort of backlash that could come from it as well. Maybe it would have been nice to have it, come later on, where they actually had something to show. But, it is what it is, and how, news and stuff gets released. So, I guess they'll just have to take it as it currently is. But yeah, I mean, I think there really is a lot that goes into it, and, without knowing any of the budgets. But I think the idea that this is, as far as we know, more in terms of a film, sort of a feature level production, which still can vary pretty hugely in terms of budget. But if they do have that sort of backing, it would be a lot more than what they would have had for like the series itself. So if it was maybe like the series was being, CG, I could see a lot more worry being needed there, because, doing that sort of stuff on that sort of budget, unless it's sort of a shorter period of episodes or whatever, it's usually pretty hard to do to sort of a higher level quality. But there definitely is, a lot that goes into this, and the fact that we haven't heard anything yet means that they're still, building and working on this. So, like we've been saying before, like, this isn't something that's going to come out like, the end of this year, or maybe even the end of next year. So there's a lot of time to be worked on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting that the article, it does link a video that is a trailer for the upcoming Paw Patrol movie. I was just having a quick look at it there. That looks kind of nicely animated in CG, and and I know Paw Patrol is like a pretty big, kids franchise, and it's kind of like, okay, that the quality actually seems quite high in comparison to other CG stuff I've seen. So, with the correct sort of styling and that sort of technical prowess, I can see something working quite well. But I think for so many people, it is going to take seeing Avatar in this CG style to be convinced. So that's always going to be the thing. And I think a lot of it comes from more of the case of people are very proud of this franchise, and the fact that it does use the traditional animation for the most part. And there was an excitement around the idea of, we are going to get to go to the theater, the cinema, to see potentially one of the best looking 2D animations of the year. And now that's not going to happen. And it feels like a sort of kind of lack of confidence type thing, the kind of way the industry is going, that like outside of anime movies you don't really see 2D animations, and that they have to do 3D because it's the only way to get people to go see it. And it just kind of feels like, oh, is this the business sort of factor coming in here? And Mike and Brian just having to accept it as like the way they can do a movie. And that'll be interesting to see, like, if any word comes out about that. I feel that just the success behind Avatar, like, they probably could have done a 2D movie and it still would have been quite successful. They're now, it depends how they market it, what they do with it, but they now sort of in a way have put a little bit of a hurdle in place of like they now have to convince people about it's Avatar, but it's not in the usual art style. Are we happy about that? But we'll see how it goes. I suppose the other question to ask you is, how do you interpret the fact that he says CG films and the new Avatar series? Do you interpret that as being that the new Avatar series will just be done in sort of the usual art style, that it definitely won't be CG, that he was specific to sort of separate them like that?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing. I mean, you can try to read into that, but there's nothing that really says that it will be in sort of the traditional mode. I mean, I guess from everything that we've seen between, Mike and Brian in terms of, where, their, sort of, I guess, artistry, goes to, at least from the past, it would make sense that that would be, if it's, a viable route that they can proceed on, that it would be something that they would do. And I think in terms of series, that definitely seems like something that's more, more readily sort of acceptable, for, I guess, what they consider like the smaller screen per se. So, I definitely, for me, that seems like that would be more of the consensus for that. But I guess, that is something that, depending on maybe how the film actually does, if it does overwhelmingly well in sort of the CG format with whatever, styling or, design rendering that they have for it, maybe that'll prove to them that they can do the series in CG if they have, sort of the budget or the framing for it. So I guess it really depends on sort of their first thing release and how well it's received.
Yeah, and then the only other thing I'm thinking of is that with the film now being confirmed to be CG, it's the first project. I've been pretty kind of vocal about I previously I felt that the film for sure has to be like ATLA related in some way as the first thing if it's going to be a film and do well. I'm kind of wondering, now that it's CG, will it still be ATLA? Will they still want to capitalize on, okay, it's the style that works at the box office, I guess, and it's going to be the characters that you also know? Or will CG open them up to, actually, now we can do whatever we want in Avatar, and it can be something more new? Just because you might actually kind of scare people away if you have like us seeing like older Aang and stuff like that in CG now. That could be a little bit weird. So how does the fact that it's CG to you sort of like, I suppose, change your sort of like perceptions on what the movie will actually be about, what they'll cover as a story?
That's a good point to make. I mean, would you alienate people by doing, a CG version of older Aang and Katara and Sokka, or would that be something that, would actually be freeing to order to do something new? I mean, they have expressed before that, they're always interested in doing something new and pushing things forward, and the technology and the artistry and, more things along that line. So I don't know. I mean, I guess in terms of, what they might be interested in doing, I could see them trying to do something new in the same, world, in the same, Avatar verse, in terms of like, profitability and marketability and all that stuff. I mean, I still think that it would make sense to do something with, the original gang, just in terms of getting, people, just fans of the original series, which, as far as we're seeing, is still more, the larger majority, to actually buy into it. So I don't know. I don't know. I think if you do it well and it works, just in terms of the story and the look and the visual appeal, that, they can pretty much do anything. And if, doing the original group, gives you that, 10% more of people who are even willing to give it a chance, then I don't know, I would see that as something to actually go for, unless they're really trying to sort of create a whole new sort of, feel for the Avatar, universe in terms of just the story and where things are actually going to go. Like, I don't know, it still seems like there's enough worth it to sort of bank on the old, the old now, I guess, two series, rather than go to something completely new. But I don't know, there could be something to say to just sort of starting from something completely fresh as well. I mean, it's still going to be in the Avatar verse, so it'll just be something, new characters.
Hmm. And then, of course, something we didn't know before is that he says a series of CG films. So we didn't know that it was planned to be a series of films, and this is just the
Hmm.
first of many. That is interesting to me. It obviously is like that's a lot. That's a lot of confidence that they're developing it not just as a solo thing, but as multiple. And where does that kind of lead you to go? Um, Maybe it being a series maybe leads you away from the idea that it'll be just like a kind of one-shot ATLA movie just to, you know, start off Avatar Studios with the nostalgia. It being a series maybe means they can just do a bit more of a epic story told across like 3 movies. We'll see how it goes. Either way, I think somewhere along the lines they have to do some sort of a ATLA project, a core project, and obviously this covers the film side of things, the series side of things, but we don't know about like spin-offs yet, short form content, which are the other things they're also going to be doing, and then we don't know where publishing stands either in all of this. So there's still lots of places we could get that stuff. It feels like at this point we're just waiting for an announcement, and especially with this news sort of slipping out there, and it maybe being the first properly negative thing about Avatar Studios that's maybe come out. I wish, I'd hope that they maybe get ahead of this and realize like, okay, we kind of need to say something here, just to clarify some things, so you don't have people just locking their opinions in here now, and you know, the fandom turning on things at all. That's why you'd maybe hope that at New York Comic Con maybe they have some sort of announcement ready to go, or that they have the big Avatar Studios announcement ready to make at some point here towards the end of the year, early next year, just to announce, okay, we've kept you waiting a year. Here's what we're actually doing in more detailed terms. Make a Marvel type announcement type thing about, we're doing this movie. It's going to be a series, but here's the first one. Here's a poster of what it's visually going to look like. Here's a similar poster for the series in a traditional style, and here's this like kids series of one shots using a kind of Republic City Hustle style or something like that, and some publishing stuff. Like, it kind of feels like at this point they're building up to a big announcement. But where do you stand on that now that this kind of relatively big piece of information has just sort of been snuck out there? Where do you think we're going to get our next piece of information on Avatar Studios from?
That's a good question. I mean, yeah, we always seem to be banking on NYCC in terms of, the main place where stuff would come out, which, I mean, I guess it makes sense, but they really, I don't know. I don't know if they really have to be beholden to that sort of, outlet now. It would be cool because, it gives us a date to look forward to on the calendar, but I don't know. I really wonder, with having, so little news from Avatar Studios overall, I don't know, it makes me wonder really how far they have, sort of like developed things. Like they're still, pulling in like, official people and stuff like that. So I don't know. I almost might not be surprised if we don't get anything at NYCC, although I don't know, it really does feel like you said, like we might be building up to it.
Yeah, the only reason I say like something kind of has to happen is because going back to the original announcement back in February, with regards to the reason we're confident about a series happening, is that the press release does say that there will be Avatar stuff on Paramount Plus within 2 months of launch, and that would be March 2023. Which, if they leave it too late, it only leaves them like a kind of year and a half or so to actually kind of make stuff happen. So sooner rather than later, that stuff like kind of has to come out. So it's kind of an interesting one. Let me see, could I find it here? Over 50 original series to premiere on Paramount Plus over the next 2 years, including Halo, Fraser, Criminal Minds, and included in this is shows from the Avatar universes and more. over the next 2 years. And that was obviously like a week or so before the launch of Paramount Plus officially. So yeah, it means like March 2023 we're expecting the series, which is the second project. I suppose it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, the second project can't actually come out first because it's a different like medium, but it kind of feels like it's a big deal. They're hyping up Avatar quite a lot. How late are they going to leave it? Especially given that it was the big thing that got the you have your own studio announcement. So they do have that to play with as well. Just the idea that we get it, it's early days yet, but keep us informed. Like, where is the official like information source? Like, are we just gonna have to read every article the Viacom website puts out, or what? But yeah, New York Comic Con's in a month. I guess in the coming weeks we'll get the full schedule for that, and there might be an Avatar thing, might not be. We'll have to wait and see. Because other than that, the rest of the year doesn't really have a lot of other Avatar content. There's some merchandise coming out, some books, but none of them like too interesting. After a lot of the delays have happened to other books, everything's kind of delayed until sort of February, when, you know, the Kickstarter Avatar Legends game is going to come out. There'll be news from that. The Chibi comic will come out. I guess preview pages for the Chibi comic is about the most interesting thing we can look forward to, and maybe some the book 4 art book announcement. But yeah, that's the only thing, is that like there's a lot of excitement about Avatar Studios, but the rest of this year doesn't immediately look like there's going to be a lot of Avatar stuff, unless they make an announcement eventually. So I suppose just the final thing here is just that where are you at with the sort of status of Avatar kind of hype as we approach the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it probably, I don't know, overall it feels like maybe it's cooled down a little bit. I don't know. It seems like, you know, with the Kickstarter and everything, it seemed like that was sort of, you know, bringing things back up a little bit high. But, you know, now that that's over and that's sort of, you know, gone through its process, things are sort of, you know, back to the sort of like waiting stages of, you know, when's the next thing, you know, officially going to be announced that's actually like, you know, really new content wise. You know, a lot of everything has seemingly been put on sort of like hold for a while, which we know that, you know, sort of happens. And we sort of know that there's other stuff coming over the hill, but, you know, like you said before, it still does seem like we're still in the early days, despite knowing all of this stuff that's coming. So I don't know. It's still, you know, I'm still, you know, somewhat excited, but it's just sort of like the holding period now of when things are actually still going to start moving.
Yeah, I think for me just the most frustrating thing is probably that it could potentially work out where like the next Avatar or Korra comic is from now a year away, because it's not coming out in February. It's probably not March or April. So unless something gets announced for like coming out in July or August over the next month or two, we probably are looking at like September next year for a newly announced book, which is obviously not a great position to be in, given that we should be going full speed into Avatar Studios at about that time, and it feels like it's only starting to ramp up. So it's a bit of a weird situation, but who knows? They might have an announcement that's bigger than we think. That just randomly hits us. We just have to keep our eye out for everything. So yeah, not really sure when the next podcast is going to be. Again, it's going to be just completely dependent on news and when it comes out. Other than that, yeah, we've covered all the news here. Lots and lots of merchandise. Like there's stuff that like we didn't even kind of cover here, just because there's not a lot to talk about. But just a lot of what we went off for pictures here was Entertainment Earth, and they have a whole section of all the Avatar stuff coming out, and there's crazy amounts of stuff, like new companies that are making like pins, and there's a company here that's just releasing buckets of buttons. like 144 piece bucket of buttons. It's just 144 Avatar like pins basically in a box. Interesting. And then like there's Avatar teapots coming out, like Avatar jigsaw puzzles, ceramic mugs, all this sort of stuff is also coming out if you look into it a little bit more. There's card sleeves if you play trading card games. There's a whole lineup of magnets coming out. Mini glasses.
We got backpacks.
Yep. Rubik's Cube, Avatar Rubik's Cube there as well. A whole other set of plushies, playing cards. It's ramping up again. It's just, the big news is what we're waiting for, of course. So, who knows? Probably maybe the next thing might be if they do a big reveal on the Avatar characters from the All-Star Brawl game. That might be something we can come on and talk about. But other than that, might be a few weeks. But that has been episode 234 of the Avatar Online podcast. This has been myself and Greg. Thanks for listening, and bye.
Bye-bye.